Hello out there. Thank you so much for showing up here today and showing your interest and support for documentary filmmaking. Welcome to the 2021 DocLands Documentary Film Festival and the launch for DocPitch 2021. We're all pretty excited, I hope. I know I am. I'm Joni Cooper, Director of Programming for DocLands. I'm a white woman with straight shoulder-length brown hair, wearing a gray turtleneck with a wooden credenza behind me with fresh orange tulips on it. I'd like to give an enormous thanks to our generous funders, the Nancy P. and Richard K. Robbins Family Foundation, Project Number 9, and members of the California Film Institute Board of Directors, as well as our sponsor, Netflix. I'm extremely grateful to them for supporting DocPitch and our mission to support documentary film and filmmakers. Thank you all in the office at CFI, all my colleagues for their enthusiasm around DocPitch and for ensuring we have an elegant means to present our virtual DocPitch. So you, the audience, can vote for your favorite of the 5 to win the $30,000 Audience Choice Award. Along with the Audience Award, we've also enlisted an industry jury who will present an additional $40,000 in award funds on May 16th. We received 73 unique submissions this year, with each and every one of them being a compelling and completely viable project. Preliminary juries were tasked to winnow these projects down to the final 5 to be pitched this year. It's my pleasure now to introduce the 5 filmmaking teams who will introduce themselves and their projects. First, I'd like to introduce Heather Courtney and Chelsea Hernandez, directors of the Untitled 19th News film.
I'm Heather Courtney, calling in from Los Angeles. I am a white woman with brown hair, wearing glasses and wearing a green shirt. And behind me is a wall with a few drawings and paintings.
Hi, I'm Chelsea Hernandez. I'm calling in from Austin, Texas, and I'm a Latina woman with fair skin, dark brown hair, long brown hair. I'm wearing a black V-neck blouse and red lipstick and long dangly red beaded earrings. And behind me is a closet door with a poster and post-it notes and a guitar hanging on the wall. We're so excited to be here. Thank you so much, DocLands, for selecting our project to participate in the pitch competition. We are so excited to share the story of the 19th with you all.
Thank you. Chelsea and Heather, you're in a bit of a unique situation with your project in that you've chosen to withdraw from the Audience Choice Award due to the confidential nature of your video material. Could you tell us a bit about yourselves and why you've decided to make this film?
Sure. Well, I first heard about the 19th News way back in January 2020 and was excited about their quest to upend the white male-dominated newsroom. As someone who is working in a white male-dominated film industry, I was inspired by the change they were trying to make. I knew following their first year would not only be a compelling story, but also one that gave me hope. And that was before the pandemic and the national racial reckoning, which has made the 19th endeavor even more important to document.
I'm also thrilled to collaborate with Heather on this film project. And as Joni mentioned, due to the confidential nature of our video material at this time, we unfortunately can't share it publicly yet. But we do want to thank the general audience for watching our pitch video, as well as the DocLands jurors. And we hope you feel inspired by this story as much as Heather and I do.
Thank you very much, you two. To me, it sounds like it's very timely and something that we really need to have. So congratulations.
Thank you.
The next project is also timely, in fact. I read about this issue just before I saw Maren Poitras' submission. Maren, will you tell us a bit about yourself and your project Finding the Money?
Sure. Yes, I do believe it is a very timely and urgent film as well, why I'm making it. And just to describe myself, I'm a white woman with long blondish hair, black shirt, and I'm standing in a hand-hewn timber frame log cabin, actually, so in the background. And my film is titled Finding the Money, and it follows a small group of underdog economists as they really attempt to flip our understanding of money, debt, and taxes perfectly upside down. So some of you may have noticed that the federal government has been spending a lot of money lately to address the COVID-19 pandemic. And you might be wondering, where exactly did Congress find all this money? Stephanie Kelton, our main character, is a economics professor and former chief economist for Bernie Sanders, says, that's really the wrong question to be asking a currency issuing government like the United States. She says, finding the money is actually the easy part. So our film follows this controversial new theory called modern monetary theory, or MMT. Now, it's been near universally, the mainstream field of economics has come out to denounce these ideas. Almost every top economist from across the political spectrum has come out to kind of call this theory maybe voodoo economics or lunacy or crazy, just plain wrong, even dangerous. But, they do say some pretty provocative things that might contradict what we've grown up hearing. Things like, taxes don't actually pay for spending, or the national debt is not a burden on our children and grandchildren, and the US government can never run out of dollars. So to frame this story, Stephanie was not an easy convert to these kind of controversial ideas herself. They in fact originate from this guy named Warren Mosler, who was a Wall Street trader and fund manager currently living in the Virgin Islands. Now, he intended to go to Ivy League universities like Harvard and Stanford and Yale and, have really interesting discussions with top economists about his new ideas. But, surprisingly enough, nobody would talk to him, so instead he ended up on this rather obscure listserv where he started posting his ideas. And Stephanie read what he was writing on this listserv, and he was saying things like, the federal government actually has to spend dollars into the economy first before they can collect any dollars back in taxes. And therefore, our hard-earned taxpayer dollars don't really pay for the national defense or healthcare or roads and bridges. So naturally, Stephanie thought, Warren was backwards. This certainly is not what she learned during her graduate degree at Cambridge. And so, she couldn't quite figure out why he was wrong, though, and she just couldn't quite let go of it. So she decided to set out to prove him wrong. She talked to people at Treasury and Federal Reserve and got on the phone with people in debt management to find out how the operations actually occurred. And, after a lengthy study, she was shocked to find herself ending up, at exactly the same place Warren had ended up. So she's basically been on a mission ever since. And we follow Stephanie's story arc from first being ignored to then being kind of laughed at and ridiculed. And now she's in maybe the fight you stage, where she's entering kind of the center of the political debate around what the federal government can afford. But really, this is not a simple debate, because I believe we can trace this conflict all the way back to the story we tell about the origin and nature of money itself. So in the film, we have kind of two parallel story arcs where we're following Stephanie's story and this underdog group of economists, as well as a historical parallel story arc where animated historical interludes weave through the film and provide clues as to the nature of money today. So we go from, actually a 5,000-year journey to find the nature of money, which includes clay tablets in ancient Mesopotamia, to tally sticks in medieval England, to cowrie shells in West Africa, paper in the US colonies, to virtual records on digital bank balance sheets today. And we start to notice this pattern that money always has two sides, like these two perfectly opposite balancing sides. So the film eventually builds to reveal what Stephanie Kelton explains the national debt actually represents. And she shows we need to flip the national debt, literally upside down in order to see the other side, the perfectly opposite mirror image balancing side. So again, ultimately, this is just a story about a group of underdogs. And the question is really, if they're right, will they prevail? Will they win in time for us to really change our understanding of the nature of money in order to understand what the federal government can afford in the face of some great challenges? So not only the COVID-19 crisis, but these long simmering crises of climate change and inequality. So that's why I believe this is a very timely and urgent story, and the story we tell about money matters. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Maren. Hey, Justinsuperstar. I hear you'll be going it alone without your producer, Noah Lang. Please tell us about yourself and your project, Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory.
Yes, so a little description about myself. I'm a white man, short brown hair. I've got blue eyes, and I'm against a blank white wall with a single lonely light switch right there. So yeah, this would be my second feature documentary, and it tells the unlikely story of how my conservative Christian parents ended up starting a small business, creating some of the world's most realistic female prosthetic nipples. And so for me, growing up as the oldest of 5 kids in a very conservative family, learning that my parents, who, especially my dad, were very mindful of censorship and just making sure things were appropriate for our family, even to the degree of like, if we couldn't watch Seinfeld because it would show couples in bed together. And obviously the nipple is a highly sexualized thing here in America. So for me to find out that they had created this little factory creating these incredibly visually perfect nipples was a complete shock. But really, the fact this documentary exists really is kind of my dad's fault. He was always filming when I was a kid. He wasn't a professional by any means. We grew up really poor in Wisconsin, but he was always borrowing cameras from other people in the church. So I was always surrounded by that kind of documentator, filmmaker type of thing. And that's also pretty amazing because we have 100 hours of archival footage from basically one of the first videos is me as a 4-year-old seeing a video camera for the first time and being like, oh, what's that, Dad? He's like, oh, it's a camera. And it's just this kind of magical moment. But yeah, my parents we grew up very poor. We were very frugal. And my dad was always inventing things and coming up with small businesses and stuff like that to make ends meet. So one of my favorite things he invented was something, 5 kids, you don't want to yell at them to get off the TV. So my dad basically took like a timer like you'd use for Christmas lights, and he stripped the wire to the TV, plugged it into this little timer, put it behind like a locked plastic case so he could set a timer for 45 minutes, walk away. When the timer went off, the TV would basically just like unplug and we couldn't play any more video games. That was kind of it. So really, like for my parents, that was always the core of it, was creating things from scratch and starting little businesses and creating other things. And for my parents, they're also very opposite. So my mom is like the most outgoing woman in the world. My dad's like super, super introverted, but they really kind of make it work. And this story it is a funny story. There's a lot of interesting aspects to it and silly characters, but it does really start with some tragedy when my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer back in 2007. And so she had to have a mastectomy and unilateral, so she just lost one of her breasts. And basically my dad found every possible way for her to beat her cancer. The reconstruction, everything was done in a totally unorthodox, off the wall kind of way. And then after the reconstruction, they build it back, but it's not symmetrical because you have the rebuilt breast and then you have the original, which still has its nipple. And when my parents looked for other options out there really was nothing. There were tattoos, but those would fade after time. And of course they weren't 3-dimensional. Or there were stick-ons, but those wouldn't match the original. So my dad took his problem-solving, inventive brain, and essentially it was like, okay, this woman's the love of my life. This is like every time she looks in the mirror, she thinks of cancer. And he just started thinking, how can I fix this problem? So he essentially took over my sister's old bedroom in the house I grew up in, and closed it off and turned it into this like nipple laboratory where he spent months and months perfecting not just like the shape, but the color, creating a mold of the original. How does it stick on, not just like fall off all the time? And this was happening like totally unknown to me or any of my siblings. And so they took their prototype to their plastic surgeon, and he was like, oh my God, there's nothing else like this on the market. You need to offer it to other people. And so they essentially made it into this small business where now my mom and dad have created over 3,000 nipples for women who have had breast cancer around the world. And this was a story that I, of course, now think is completely amazing, but it was happening really behind closed doors for many, many years. And it was something that me and my siblings knew about to some degree, but we really didn't know any details outside of some business about my mom's cancer. That was kind of it. So rather than just be upfront and actually ask about it, I decided to make a documentary about it. And that is how Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory came to be. And it's been an incredibly transformative thing for myself and my family. And in these times where really unity is so important, I think it's a love story that really everyone on all sides can appreciate. And I'm excited to share it with the world, hopefully soon. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Justinsuperstar. And now I'd like to introduce Amahamola and Rajal Pitroda to tell us about their project, Higher 15.
Hi, thanks for having us. So my audio description, I'm a Black man. I have short blackish gray hair. I have a short beard and a mustache, and I'm wearing a blue shirt with darker blue stripes, and there's a wall quilt is what it's called, a piece of art behind me that's pretty intricate.
My name is Rajal Pitroda. I am an Indian American woman. I have wavy black and gray hair. I'm wearing a black top, and I'm sitting in front of a white bookcase with books and photos on it.
So a short description of our film. The name is Higher 15. It's about a long buried family secret that was brought to light by a really remarkable chance encounter. And so my uncle was a revolutionary in Ethiopia in the 1970s. He was unlawfully imprisoned and imprisoned at a makeshift prison called Higher 15. This prison was very brutal because there was a really vicious prison guard there named Worku who he sexually assaulted people, he tortured folks, he also killed over 200 prisoners. And so he was able to do this because it was a fairly lawless time in Ethiopia because of the revolution. And as a result of that, my uncle didn't want to die, so he escaped from prison, and my grandparents paid these nomads to smuggle him across the desert, where he walked for 10 days and 200 miles into Djibouti, and was eventually able to come to the US, where my parents had fortunately left about 2 months before the violence started in Ethiopia and the revolution started there. So my uncle establishes himself in Colorado, he gets a job, he goes to school, he gets married, and then 33 years later, he goes to a cafe in Denver and he sees that prison guard there who tortured him in prison and did all those terrible things decades before. And so our story goes into that, and also that my uncle became the lead witness in the trial against Worku, who is now serving a 22-year sentence in federal prison in Colorado. So our story is really about a lot of different themes. It's about secrets and them being revealed. It's about belonging. It's about one family and kind of how situations in different countries and things that happen end up, what happens to these families decades later and years later as they establish themselves in different countries. So it's about a lot of different things in that way.
Thank you very much. That's quite an intriguing story. Rachel Elizabeth Seed and Danielle Varga are going to fill us in on their project, the fifth project, A Photographic Memory.
Thank you, Joni. So my name is Rachel Elizabeth Seed, and I'm the director of the film A Photographic Memory. Thank you so much to the California Film Institute and DocLands team for including our project in this year's DocPitch. We're very excited to be here. I am a white Jewish woman with olive skin, dark brown hair up in a bun, and I'm wearing a bright green long sleeve shirt with a tall bookshelf of photography books behind me. And on the other side is a white wall of a post-war one-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, New York. So A Photographic Memory is a film about building a relationship with my mother, who died when I was a baby, through the work she created as an international journalist and photographer during her brief life. A little backstory is that growing up, I knew very little about my mom, but when I was in my late 20s, I came across a box of my mother's work, which was a series of audiovisual films she made about iconic photographers of the 20th century in my father's attic. And I asked him if her raw interviews still existed so that I could hear her interview the photographers. So he told me that he sent them to the International Center of Photography after she died for safekeeping in 1979. And 30 years later, I contacted them to see if they were still there. I found out that, in fact, they were in the archives. There were 12 boxes that had been preserved for decades, untouched, basically like a time capsule. And this discovery brought me to New York 10 years ago to get to know her through her work. I didn't have any memories of her at that time. I couldn't picture her moving. I didn't know what her voice sounded like. But when I threaded in the audio reels at ICP, I heard her voice for the first time since I was a baby. And I was surprised to find that it actually sounded familiar to me. So this experience was uncanny for several reasons. The first interview of hers that I listened to was with ICP's founder, Cornell Kappa, who was also the person who introduced my parents to each other. My boss at ICP set me up in Kappa's former office in their building. And for some reason, it was still intact as he had left it, even though he had died a few years before. So I sat there alone in the room with this 1970s reel-to-reel player spinning and Kappa's belongings all around me. And as I pressed play, I heard he and my mom chatting, laughing, and philosophizing about photography in 1971. But I felt like I had traveled in time and was sitting in the room with them. So that moment of connection is what sparked the idea to make this film, because it felt like there was something bigger than myself at play, and that sharing my mother's work and spirit could be a cathartic experience for anyone who was grappling with questions about mortality, time, memory, and how to live a passionate, creative life, as these were all themes that she discussed with these photographers in their deep and meaningful conversations. So now 10 years after that moment and much filmmaking later, we're in post-production on this film, and we're excited to share more of the story with you through the video we created for DocPitch. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Varga, and I'm the producer. I am a white woman with dark brown hair and short bangs, a blue shirt, and dangly earrings. And I just wanted to add that I've been working with Rachel on this film for about 5 years. I met Rachel after at a Q&A. I just co-produced camera person, and we ended up sharing a cab home from that Q&A, and I got to know her and her mother, Sheila, who was an incredible woman, really ahead of her time. And yeah, I'm excited to be working on this film that really centers women, especially women in the 70s and 80s who are often, put in the shadows, and their legacies go forgotten. And yeah, it's a beautiful, incredibly special project about loss and love. grief and the art of photography as well. So yeah, thank you for having us, and we're very happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for sharing yourselves and your projects with us, and for putting your thoughts and ideas out into the world for others to discover too. These filmmakers have done their work, and it's up to you, all of you out there, to support them by voting. Go to our website, doclands.com, and follow the DocPitch link. Voting is open until midnight on May 10th. Please be aware that you're only allowed 1 vote per person. I know it's not going to be easy choosing just one project, but that's why you need to take your time, read all the materials that each filmmaker team has provided, watch the video pitch, and evaluate wisely as to which project you most strongly believe should become a feature-length documentary film. Thank you all to the pitching teams for all the work you've done to get this far. And for all of you out there in cyberspace, thank you for joining us and for supporting DocLands. Thank you too to all our sponsors and donors. I'm so very grateful to you for helping us keep DocLands alive and kicking through this very challenging year. Please also take in as many of the films as you can. We have on offer until May 16th. We owe so much to documentary filmmakers. They add so much to our worlds. I know for me, pretty much everything I've learned through documentaries. Now get over to our website and vote. There's cash on the line here. Thank you all.